Mr. Steve Rosen.
Yes.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We promised to be easy on you today.
Well, I'm not going to be elaborate as Mr. Shanker because I got to say that he is the most beautiful speaker and writes the most beautiful letters of anybody that I've ever known. And I think that everybody knows that.
He's got one of the best reputations of anybody.
And Jerry Rubenstein calls him silver-tongued Benny Shanker. And that's a compliment, Benny.
Well, Steve, we're going to continue our interviewing process with Mr. Steve Rosen. Today is still February 12th, 2019.
Okay.
And Stephen, welcome.
Thank you.
And I wanted to ask you, how'd you get in the steel pipe business, and when was that?
Probably late 73, and I got involved through my older brother, Harvey Rosen, who's 16 years older, who has passed away several years ago. He had purchased a pipeline, actually starting up in East Texas, around Tyler, somewhere up around there, and it came down to Beaumont, and it was nearly 1.5 million feet of pipe that was going to be removed from the ground. And he asked me if I wanted to come down and help him, and I had no experience in the pipe business other than in high school. I drove a truck because he was in the oil business, and I went out and drove a, Benny, what do you call those A-frame trucks? With the,
Gin truck.
A gin truck. And I wasn't supposed to be driving it, but I was 16 years old, and I went out to Great Bend, Kansas, and he had some tubing and stuff, and so I got on one end of the tubing, another got on the other, and we'd sling it on the truck. And we'd haul it out to some leases he had, and I guess his foreman at the time didn't know that I shouldn't be driving a truck, or Harvey didn't want me driving a truck on a highway, but there I was driving a gin truck down the highway, and then we get out there, and that was my first experience in the pipe business, and it was fun. I worked there for a summer doing that.
And that was your summer job as a 16-year-old?
Yeah, I was about 16 years old then, in addition to working in a restaurant in Wichita, Kansas.
Okay.
And so years passed, and I went to college a little bit for about a year, and then I decided that college wasn't for me. And so I moved to California, and I got a job with Trans World Airlines. And I worked in the reservation department in Los Angeles. And then I didn't like Los Angeles after a year, so I moved back to Wichita. I loaded baggage, fueled airplanes, worked for TWA, got to travel quite a bit, went to Europe a few times, getting a different kind of education than some people got. Ended up in Colorado, and that's when I got a call from my brother that he had purchased a pipeline in Beaumont. And there was this 1.5 million foot job, and he asked me if I wanted to come down and help him because he was having some health problems. So I thought it'd be a great adventure. And when I got down there, I really liked being in the pipe business. And I knew people in the pipe business already, in the scrap business, because we're from Wichita, Kansas, and I knew that it could be lucrative. And I said, you know what? This fits me perfect because I can put on a pair of jeans every day. I don't have to sit in an office. Every day is going to be a different day, and it was. That's how I got started.
Okay. And that's what was your brother's name again?
Harvey Rosen.
Harvey Rosen.
And at that time, our company was called PD Pipe and Supply because it was a partnership with, remember that, Ben?
Yeah.
PD Pipe. He had entered into a partnership with a big auctioneering firm out of Dallas called Parks Davis Auctioneers. They were oil field auctioneers. Then we moved to Houston and changed the name to Houston Pipe and Supply. A couple years later, after that first project ended.
What year was that Houston Pipe and Supply?
1976, I think we came to Houston.
You were still 19. You were a young guy.
No, I wasn't 19. I was, by this time, I was 72.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just teasing. I was born in 47. So what does that make it? In 74, about 27 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Houston Pipe and Supply out of Beaumont?
We were in Houston. We had moved. We were in Beaumont for the first project, finished that, and we decided that if we're going to stay in Texas, we bought another big project after that, about 1.3 million feet of pipe to remove. And we decided we'd rather be in Houston than in Beaumont. There's just more action, more activity.
Sure.
So that's where we moved.
Okay.
And brought all the pipe to Houston instead of Beaumont, which is only 90 miles apart.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. I remember inland.
So I stayed with my brother until then, and we did a project here in Oklahoma City that Mr. Shanker helped us on with property, threading machines. It was another 800,000 feet of pipe that we processed through that yard on Southeast 15th Street. Went from there to San Antonio, probably removed 800,000 feet of 16 and 18 and 20 inch pipe, which we'd all love to have today.
Right.
And then about then we bought a pipeline in just outside Shreveport. And we had a customer who was coming in from Great Bend, Kansas to look at some pipe, and his plane was late. I sat in the terminal, and then a young lady gets off the plane, another plane, because I was waiting for the customer, and she's my wife today. I met her in the Shreveport airport, and we had a wonderful one-year relationship, and we got married in '81. And so it was about that time that I started feeling that I wanted to do something on my own. And I had a nice relationship where I was actually receiving a nice percentage of the profits on these projects by that time. And my brother at that time decided he wanted to go into the pipe threading business, which they opened up Texas Pipe Threaders, which is a pretty good sized pipe threading operation, along with Jim Bass. I don't know if you all remember Jim Bass. And Milton Feinberg from El Paso was involved in that too. Bobby Jacobson's family. And I said, I like the pipeline removal business. I'm going to just go it alone. And I just wanted something that I could say was my own. And I do remember going into talking to my brother. He was, a little bit upset that we were separating because we were close. And we always remained close, even till his death. But I remember walking into the office and telling his secretary that I'm going to go on my own. And she told me, you'll never make it on your own. And I said, well, we'll see about that. And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that was, you talk about somebody who gives you a challenge.
Yeah.
That was my challenge.
And that was about 1982?
That was 1980. I incorporated in 1980. And I opened an office, and I had a telephone, and I hired a secretary, and she bought me a plant, and that's all we had in there. We had no customers, and a plant, and a desk, and a telephone. And I just started contacting companies and started answering bids. In those days, there were lots of bids for pipelines all the time. Just go from one to another. And that's how I got started.
Do you have a favorite project? Thinking back in those times, back in the early 80s, maybe one that gave you just a great deal of satisfaction.
I'd say, probably the first project in Beaumont, because I was cutting my teeth. And since there were 16 years between my brother and myself, we'd been living different lives. I'd been living in one part of the country. He was married. He was from Kansas, but he came to Texas for the project. And it was a wonderful bonding experience for us as brothers. Came real close. We had so much fun.
How much older was he than you?
16 years. So, we're in Beaumont, Texas. His family was still in Kansas, but they were going to move down to Texas because his daughters were getting ready to start college. They wanted to go to the University of Texas. But meanwhile, Harvey and I were in Beaumont together, and we were working hard. It was hot, rainy summer days, and lots of pipe to process. We were threading pipe, straightening, cleaning, drifting pipe. But we worked hard, and at the end of the day, we always went out together and ate a steak, drank some cold beer. He bought a houseboat up on Lake Livingston, about 60 miles. At the end of the day, we'd drive up and sit on the back of the boat and crappie fish, drink beer till midnight, go to sleep, drive back down to the yard in the morning, go to work. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun for me. And in that period of time, other little deals were coming up that I would go out and inspect different parts of pipe all over the country, no matter where it was. So I thought this was really a fun job for a young guy. I'm footloose and fancy-free. I get to travel a little bit, meet people. And I did that until 1980, till I came to Houston. Of course, we were in Houston a few years before that. And then I met my wife. That's what I was trying to tell you before. So I met my wife and thinking about getting married. And I wanted something for my own. I realized I might have children. Maybe they wanted to be in the business, maybe not. And started Inland Pipe and Supply. Not too long after that, I got a project for a couple 100,000 feet of, I remember it's 12-inch pipe. And took the job on by myself, and it did well, and just kind of went from there.
Yeah. Probably safe to say that your brother Harvey was your mentor.
He was my mentor, but there were other mentors. Here's one of them right here, Mr. Shanker. He would come to Beaumont with his, was John Ellis your right-hand man?
Right.
He was your right-hand man. And I spent a lot of time with John Ellis and Ben Shanker. Ben would come down to Beaumont. We'd have dinner together. Ben would come out the pipe yard. He would show me how to grade pipe, show me what kind of pipe he wanted. And then we put the other pile in the other pile for the other customers. There were structural customers. There were people who didn't really care if the pipe was pitted. They're going to run it for shallow well surface pipe anyway, even with all the pits and junk on it. But Ben taught me a lot, and so did John Ellis. Those were special days. Vernon, your truck driver, I still have pictures. Maybe did I send them to you? I don't know if I did or not. I've got a picture of Harvey and I standing next to an H&H truck.
Oh, yes. Peterbilt.
With the Peterbilt, the blue Peterbilt.
You and I were, during lunchtime, we were discussing times back in the 80s and 90s and how Pete Knowles had touched our lives. Was he, more of a friend to you, or was he also a business associate?
Well, in those days, the competition for pipeline removal was Gensco.
Pete Knowles.
Mm-hmm. And Gensco would partner a lot of deals with Jerry Rubenstein. Jerry's not into the used pipe business today, but they would do deals. There would be Jerry, and I'm trying to think who else was doing it. But there was always people who were removing pipelines. But I would, Bill Thomas, and of course Pete would join. And but I was bidding deals by myself, and I started winning these deals. So after a few deals, Pete called me and he said, "Look, let's why don't we get together on these deals?" And so we had a lot of deals together. Pipeline removal deals. We took out some pretty sizable lines.
Yeah. What were some of your most fond memories with Pete as an individual that you might want to share?
Well, he was just a character, one of a kind. I mean, I was at a convention and staying in Las Vegas with him. He asked me to stay in his room just to make sure that he woke up the next morning. So he had a suite in one of the fancy hotels, and he said, if I'm not awake in the morning, call somebody. And so We did that. You and I talked about the fact that we had to kind of revive him one day at a convention in Dallas. His wife, Debbie, called me and asked me to come down to the room about 4 o'clock in the morning that they thought Pete was having a heart attack. He survived. He had 3 major heart attacks. We did a lot of things together. 1991, I had a heart attack myself working on a pipeline project. And I was laid up for a few weeks, and I was in the hospital. And Pete called me, and he said, "Don't worry, sunshine." He said, "I've had 3 of these already." And he said, "We're still going." He says, "Look, any deal that I'm in, you can have half of it." And that's just the kind of way it worked for a long time. So Pete and Bill Thomas and I, we joint ventured on quite a few deals.
Yeah.
I did a lot of the legwork, you know. Pete wasn't able to do the legwork, so.
Sure.
But he was a great mentor to me also.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And by this time, my brother was already in the pipe threading business and doing other things.
And doing well.
So I was already, yeah. That's kind of the story of my career.
Sure. If you were to talk to a younger person who was just getting ready to get started in the business, what would you say the secret to your success was? What would you tell them?
Well, I'm kind of a type A person, probably not a very good delegator, but I like to be hands-on. So any project I had, anything I bought, I was out there looking at it. I was there when it was loaded out. I was making sure that the customer got what they needed. Every customer has a different need. Some will take a little rougher pipe, some better pipe. You just know who will do what. So I was pretty hands-on. I traveled a lot. And when Benny talks about his family, I was doing the same thing. I was probably gone 4 days a week. Morning till night, I would leave 3 o'clock in the morning and drive. I might drive to Laredo, Texas, which is a 5 or 6 hour drive. Work all day, leave at 6 o'clock at night and drive home. Not that I'd see the kids awake, because we had 4 kids at home. But I was there in the morning when they woke up. They'd go to school, I'd leave again.
Yeah.
And my wife took care of the kids.
Sure.
That's just the way it was.
I understand. Yeah. It boils right back down to the work ethic and just no substitution for hard work.
My dad died when I was 14, and we didn't have a lot of money. We weren't destitute, but I did go to work. I bought my own cars, and I started paying my own car insurance, and I learned how to work. I worked 3 jobs. Not menial jobs. I mean, not great jobs. They were menial jobs. But I was able to buy my own clothes, my own car, my own gas.
What do you, looking back, and maybe some of those early years, during some of those low points, in the pipe business, whether it be in the mid 80s, we've touched on that a time or two today, or other times, was there a low point, in your career, maybe at the beginning or the middle part where, you just wanted to say, screw it, I'm going to sell.
No,
what I got.
I never did. I was fortunate I could roll from one to another. What I did learn pretty quick was when the market's down, you buy cheaper. A lot of people were scared to buy a deal for, didn't want to sink their money into a few 100,000 feet of pipe. And you'd buy a deal there, but you'd buy it a lot cheaper. And you would sell it for much less than we would sell for a couple of years later, but you could sell it and you could make some money. And I never looked back whether I made 50 cents a foot or $2 a foot. If I was making money and moving the pipe out, I was happy. I just figured there's always going to be another deal.
Right.
Just move it on. And so I probably left a lot of money on the table. I'm sure I did. But I never looked back. Always made money.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Share with us maybe some of the changes that you've witnessed along the years. We talk, of course, a lot about technological changes. but maybe share a couple of your thoughts in what you've seen in changes.
Well, yeah, aside from the internet, the computer, cell phones and all that, we would be on a hot summer afternoon and you have to make phone calls and you would stand by a payphone alongside at a gas station for 3 or 4 hours, pumping quarters in, had a ATT credit card that you were getting charged a fortune for these calls. I think the biggest thing is the personal contact, because when I was buying deals, I was going in and talking to people, and I would go meet in the offices wherever they might be. A lot of them were in Houston, and you put on a sport jacket and a tie, and you go down and talk to them. Today, everything's in a golf shirt, very casual, but you dress up and you would try and impress somebody. And so that's how a lot of deals were made. And I think that it wasn't always like this, but there were a few companies that would kind of take you under their wing, and you might not be the highest bidder, but if they liked you, they might give you the deal.
Sure.
And it seemed like, and I may be wrong, Benny, Mr. Brinkley and Al, but it seemed like everybody kind of had a little territory back in those days. You wouldn't intrude on somebody else's territory. They had their people, we had our people. The boys in Oklahoma had their companies that they do business with, and if I'd call them up and try and horn in on a deal, I'm sure that they knew that I was trying to horn in on a deal. So, you just kind of, there was enough for everybody.
Sure. Yeah.
I think there was, anyway.
Very good.
That's my take on it.
Yeah. How have the relationships changed today? Is it really more about the technology, or has there been a definite shift in how relationships are handled today?
Well, me personally, I still like to talk to people. I don't like texting. I don't like emails. I do it, but I don't like it. I'd still rather talk to a person face to face. Talk to a customer face to face. I don't see the point in exchanging tons of emails and texts.
Right.
Just call and talk.
Right. Yeah.
Customer, talk to them. I've developed some wonderful friendships with people in very small towns, people that I have a completely different lifestyle than I do. And we have become very, very good friends to the point where they send me holiday cards, Jewish holiday cards. They're not Jewish. They respect what I have. I respect what they have. And that's kind of how I try to build my relationships.
Besides your career, what are some of the things that would give you the most satisfaction? What maybe other things that you're proud of other than your steel pipe career?
Well, there's certainly family. I mean, I had a great wife. I have a great wife. Have 4 great kids. I have some grandchildren. The friendships, I think that everybody said, that the friendships you develop along the way, you become kind of like family in a lot of ways. We not only we talk about pipe, I know with Donnie, we can talk about family. Everybody's got family issues, and you get to the point where you can talk about all sorts of different situations in your life. That's what I liked in this business. That's what's given me the satisfaction, I think. Other than my career, I mean, look, I like to do a lot of different things. I like to travel. I like to play golf. I like to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
But the pipe business has made it possible for me to do that. And I have never felt like I have really, I know that I've worked hard and I've put in a lot of hours and a lot of travel time, but I never felt like I was working hard. And I think did I mention that I had a heart attack in 1991?
You did, yeah.
I remember something that Benny Shanker said to me. In fact, I think you sent me an article, Benny, and you said the stress of working is a lot less than the stress of not working. And I never forgot that. I never thought that I was pushing myself too hard when I was getting home at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Maybe it does take a toll on your body. I don't know. I never felt it did. I'm still doing it. And I'm going to be 72 now, so I don't feel that driving from Houston to Oklahoma City is any big deal.
Yeah.
Now I could drive another 5 hours tonight if I need to. It's not going to hurt me.
Right. If you could go back in time and meet yourself at the start of your career, what advice would you give yourself? Anything that you would like to change or anything?
Yeah, I mean, it all worked out fine for me. I was very fortunate to, in 1978, I think it was 78, when we met a gentleman that I mentioned. He was my pipeline foreman, and he had worked on the Alaskan pipeline with the head of tie-ins, I guess. He had 600 or 800 men working for him, so he knew how to work men, and he was sharp. When I say he was sharp, he never went to school past high school, but he knew how to make a man work without making him feel like he was driving him. I've never seen a person manipulate people like that, or motivate them. I shouldn't say manipulate, motivate them. And when he said that he wanted to work for me, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because we had great success in pipeline removal, but I give him all the credit for it. I didn't do it. I had to go down and buy the deal, and I would do a lot of work. I'd be out there working every day. But he's the one who made it possible. I didn't know all the ins and outs. He'd been pipelining his whole life. He was a pipeliner.
What was his name?
Well, we called him Twister. His name was E.F. Oliver. And my situation fit him perfectly. He didn't want to work 12 months out of the year, but usually we had projects going 8 months out of the year. He had time off with his family, which he really liked. But he stayed on my payroll for 30 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Till he just couldn't go anymore.
That's a testament right there.
Yeah. And I don't know what, I can't remember the question you asked me, but at the beginning, as a young person and being green, I didn't probably appreciate him as much as I did as the years went on. And I realized how good he was, not only at his job, but he was looking out for me every minute. And in his later years, I spent a lot of time with his family. He became family to me. And so I attributed everything to him, not to me.
That's awesome.
That's kind of how I feel that I got along all these years.
That's great.
You got to have good people.
Yes, sir. Is there anything I didn't ask you that maybe you had written down in your notes? Anything that you wanted to share?
I only would say there was one question. What was your first convention, NASPD convention?
Yeah, we never really talked too much about the NASPD, I guess, did we?
Well, certainly met a group of wonderful, wonderful people. And but the first NASPD convention was very beneficial for me because it was in Nassau, Bahamas.
I remember hearing about that.
Huh?
I remember hearing about that.
And it was on a Sunday, and my wife and I were getting ready to leave for the airport, and I ran into Harvey Mizell in the lobby of the hotel. And he says, "Are you bidding on the deal in Colorado?" I said, "Well, I don't know anything about the deal in Colorado." And he says, "Well, it's way too big for me." And he said, "Maybe you're interested." And he told me about it. And it was probably 500,000 feet of pipe east of Denver. And I said, "I'd be interested, and if I can buy it, I'll certainly pay you a commission on it." And he told me about it. And I went back to Houston, called the company the next day, and I said, "I can be in Denver tomorrow morning." The bid was due Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock. This was already Monday in Houston. And so I went to Denver that day, looked at it. Company was based out of Mississippi. Looked at it, got on a plane late that afternoon, got to Jackson, Mississippi at midnight. Was in the office the next morning, told them how I would do it and how I would do the job. Got on a plane, flew to Houston. They called my office. They said, "We accept your bid." I went home and I was scared. I said, Pam, I think I really made a big mistake. I don't know, how am I going to operate 1,000 miles from home? But we did it. And so had it not been for the NASPD, that's the point. Had I not gone to that convention, had I not joined, it was a very lucrative project, and so that was advantageous. And I think I found out and made lots of relationships that were beneficial through the years because of that membership.
Sure.
So that's all I want to relay about the NASPD conventions. And
Well, I used to have a wonderful time with you and Saul and Jimmy Walters. We used to have a foursome, and we played a lot of golf.
Well, I had, a ton of people, and I just made a list of some of the people that were influential, really influential, and people that I really liked. Certainly as far as the influential people, I have to start with my brother Harvey, who, was, kind of took over as my father when my dad died. But then we developed a real brotherly relationship through the years. Benny Shanker, Bernard Shanker, John Ellis, Bernard Shank. These guys were, when we were in Oklahoma City, they were the best. I spent a lot of time with Benny's family. Bernard would call me up, said, "You going to Houston this weekend?" "No." He says, "Meet me at Denny's on Saturday morning." We'd sit at Denny's on Southeast 15th Street and have breakfast. Pete, Jerry Rubenstein, Alan Don, Lou Soloway, what a character. I used to go to Las Vegas with Lou and Zelda all the time. Back in my single days, Raymond Friedlander would call me 3 or 4 times a day. And the first thing he'd say, "Did you hear about the guy who, he always had a joke." That's the way he would start it off. Bill Thomas, I was really close to Earl Cohen, Harry Warner, Jimmy Walters, Saul and Jackie Rosenberg, Jack Trachtenberg, Andre Crispin. I started doing a lot more with him in my later years. Joe Bergfeld, Arthur and Carl Arnold, who the Shankers introduced us to. Bobby Jacobson, Fred Pechter from Altoona. When I first got started in the pipe business, and Pam and I were just married, Fred asked me to move to Altoona, Pennsylvania, and come into his company. And we actually thought about it for a while. He said, "My kids don't want to be in the business." He said, "We've got a great business up there." And he said, "You would be good." Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. But got very close to moving to Altoona, Pennsylvania. And I can't remember what the name of Fred's company was. Anybody remember Fred?
I remember him, but I can't remember the name of
Wasn't
it.
Altoona Pipe and Supply? No?
Could have been.
I think
And he
you're
did, and he did a lot with the rail business. He had sold railroad supplies too. I will really, and Fred was a very, of course you knew Fred,
Yeah.
very distinguished man. I will relay one funny story, because you ask about a funny story. Maybe I shouldn't say this, maybe I should, but Fred and Shirley Pechter were, beautiful people. Certainly much older than me at the time, but we developed this friendship where we would have dinner all the time. And so we were at this convention in Birmingham, and I think we had just viewed the Fairfield Works at U.S. Steel that day, and then that night, a whole bunch of guys at a cocktail party said, let's go to this ladies' club, strip club. Ton of guys at the convention.
Right.
It was just all in fun. Fred walks in there with a beautiful wool double-breasted suit, dressed to the T, and we walk in, and this DJ sees us coming in, and he announces, Henry Kissinger has just entered the room. That would be Fred Spector. So, Fred, we just had a lot of fun. We're all sitting around a table. We're having a few beers, and Fred was having such a good time. And we went back to the meeting, and he said, Steve, he says, I want you to tell Shirley, that was his wife, exactly what we did tonight. And I told Shirley, and she was the coolest woman in the world. And she was so happy for Fred that he did that with all the guys. It was just the neatest experience. I mean, I've never seen a wife act like that. She was wonderful.
That is a good story.
And I loved Fred anyway, so almost went to work for him. So it might have been different
Yeah,
for me.
yeah. Well, that's awesome.
And really, that's kind of my story.
Fantastic. Appreciate your time. I want you to know that the invitation's always open to come to NASPD meetings.
Thank you.
We would love to have you. Just period. End
New
of
Orleans
story.
in 3 weeks,
That's right.
It's in 3 weeks.
every month.
You asked me, did I have any other questions?
Yep. Any other questions?
Do you owe me any money?
No. I do not. Not
Okay.
that would-
That's all. just checking.
I'm going to check my pockets. I can tell you that.